The palace was alive with light, but it was not the warm kind that comforted. It was sharp and cold, like the gleam of fangs before a bite. Golden chandeliers dripped with candles that flickered over marble floors the color of dried blood. The air smelled of iron and old perfume. Lyra kept her head bowed as she carried the silver tray through the grand hall. Every crystal goblet on it was filled with thick, red liquid that wasn't wine. Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. A human servant spilling even one drop of vampire blood could mean punishment, or worse. Around her, vampires lounged on velvet chairs and golden thrones, laughing softly, their voices smooth and dangerous. Their pale skin glowed under the candlelight. Their eyes, glowing shades of red and gold, followed her as she passed. Lyra could feel them studying her, her pulse, her breath, the warmth of her life. "Keep your eyes down," she reminded herself under her breath. "Do not look at them. Do not speak unless spoken to." She passed one of the long banquet tables where two female vampires whispered to each other. "The raids on the eastern towns were successful," one said, swirling her goblet. "The humans ran faster this time. I almost missed the days when they used to fight back." Her companion smiled, a smile too perfect to be human. "Their fear makes the blood sweeter. Let them run." Lyra clenched her jaw and refilled their goblets without a word. Her hand brushed the rim of the cup, and she fought the urge to shiver. It had been 3 months since she came here, 3 months pretending to be just another servant girl. But under her long sleeve, a faint mark burned softly against her skin, a twisting silver serpent biting its tail. The serpent mark. If any of these vampires saw it, they'd tear her apart. That mark was the ancient symbol of the human hunters, the sworn enemies of vampire kind. She had only one mission: stay hidden, gather information, and wait for the signal from the resistance. But tonight something in the air felt wrong. The room hummed with an electric energy that made the hairs on her arms stand up. At the far end of the hall, the huge doors swung open. A cold wind swept through, snuffing out a few candles. Every vampire immediately stopped speaking and bowed their heads. "The prince approaches," someone whispered. Lyra looked up despite herself, and froze. Prince Rael of the Crimson Throne entered the hall like a shadow come to life. He was tall and sharply built, his long black hair falling past his collar. His eyes, storm gray with flecks of silver, seemed to see everything and nothing all at once. His coat was dark blue, trimmed in silver thread that caught the light like stars. Even the older nobles looked uneasy as he passed. Rael didn't smile. He didn't need to. His presence alone filled the room with quiet fear. Lyra quickly lowered her gaze and stepped aside, her tray balanced in both hands. But as he walked by, his attention shifted slightly. For a heartbeat, his eyes lingered on her. She felt it like a physical touch. She tried to breathe normally, to look away. Then she tripped. The heel of her worn shoe caught on the edge of the rug, and the silver tray slipped. Time slowed. The goblets tumbled in the air, spinning like glass stars, before crashing onto the marble floor. Blood splashed across the ground, and worse, across the prince's boots. The hall fell silent. Every pair of glowing eyes turned toward her. Lyra's heart stopped. She dropped to her knees, frantically wiping at the blood with her apron. I'm sorry, my lord. Forgive me, please, it was an accident." "An accident?" A vampire snarled from the nearest table. It was Lord Varin, one of the Emperor's cruelest advisors. His fangs glinted as he stood. "You dare stain the royal floor with your filthy human hands." Rael said nothing at first. He simply looked down at her. His expression was unreadable. No anger, no mercy. Just silence. Then, as Lyra reached forward to grab a fallen goblet, her sleeve slid up. The mark, bright silver in the candlelight, caught his eye. A serpent coiled around itself, glowing faintly against her skin. Rael's eyes widened. He froze completely, his breath catching in his throat. "No!" he murmured almost too softly to hear. It can't be. The other vampires noticed his reaction. Then they saw the mark. Hunter! Someone shouted. She bears the serpent mark. Chaos erupted instantly. Chairs crashed, fangs bared, hisses filled the air. Several vampires lunged forward. Lyra stumbled back, her sleeve falling down to cover the mark, but it was too late. Kill her! Lord Varon roared, vaulting over the table. His claws extended, his face twisted in fury. But before he could reach her, a voice like thunder shook the room. Stop! Every vampire froze. Rael stood between her and the others, his hand raised. The air itself seemed to obey him, stilling in fear. She's mine, he said quietly. No one touches her. The words echoed through the hall, sharp and final. Lord Varon hesitated, eyes blazing. My prince, she's a hunter. She carries the cursed mark. And yet, Rael interrupted, his tone turning icy. You question me? The older vampire lowered his gaze instantly. Forgive me, my lord. Rael turned back to Lyra, who still knelt on the floor, her heart pounding so hard she could barely breathe. What is your name? He asked softly. She hesitated. Lyra. Lyra Vance. Lyra, he repeated, as if testing how it felt on his tongue. You will come with me. The guards moved closer, uncertain. To your chambers, my lord, one asked cautiously. Rael's silver eyes flicked toward him, cold and dangerous. Yes, and anyone who follows will die. He extended his hand to Lyra. For a moment she thought he might strike her, but instead he said simply, Get up. Her body trembled as she obeyed, every instinct screaming that this was the end. As he led her out of the hall, the murmurs rose behind them like waves. The prince protects a hunter. Madness. He'll doom us all. But Rael didn't look back. And Lyra, though terrified, couldn't help but wonder, why had he spared her life? Rael's private chambers were nothing like the hall. They were quiet, almost peaceful. Books lined tall shelves, and a fire burned low in the marble hearth. A massive window overlooked the moonlit gardens, their white roses glowing faintly under the stars. Lyra stood near the door, hands shaking, while two guards closed it behind her. She half expected Rael to order them to kill her then and there. Instead he said simply, Leave us. The guards hesitated. But my lord. Rael turned his head slightly, and the temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Did I stutter? They bowed quickly and left. The door shut with a heavy thud. Now it was only the two of them. Rael faced the fire for a long moment before speaking. Show me the mark again. Lyra wrapped her arms around herself. I don't know what you're talking about. He turned slowly. Don't lie to me. His eyes had changed. No longer the distant, cold eyes of a prince, but sharp, piercing, almost human. That mark, he said quietly, shouldn't exist anymore. It was destroyed centuries ago. Lyra hesitated. Her mind raced. Should she deny it again? Admit it? I don't know what it means, she said finally. I was born with it. That's all. Rael stepped closer, his voice low. You expect me to believe you were simply born with a mark of power older than your entire race? I'm telling the truth, she said, forcing herself to meet his gaze. My father said it was a curse. I've hidden it all my life. Rael studied her face, searching for deception. After a moment he turned away again. That symbol, he murmured, was once a sign of peace. Peace, she repeated, confused. The serpent mark belongs to the hunters. He gave a bitter laugh. That's what your people believe now. But once, it meant something else. He walked to a nearby cabinet and pulled out a small old book. The cover was black leather, cracked and faded. He flipped it open and pointed to a drawing. Lyra stepped closer. The page showed the same mark. Two serpents intertwined, forming a circle. Underneath it, words in an old script she couldn't read. This mark, Rael said softly, belonged to a woman who tried to unite vampires and humans centuries ago. Her name was Alara. Lyra's breath caught. That's impossible. The hunters say the first bearer of the mark destroyed thousands of vampires. She didn't destroy us, Rael said. She saved us. And then your kind twisted her name into a curse. He turned the page, revealing a faded sketch of a woman with dark hair and calm eyes. On her wrist the mark gleamed. She was human, he said. And she loved a vampire. She believed peace could exist between us. For a while it did. Lyra felt something strange stir inside her. A flicker of recognition. How do you know all this? Rael looked at her. His expression distant. Because I remember her. The fire crackled between them. Lyra stared at him, unsure if she'd heard correctly. You mean, she was my ancestor, he said finally. Or something more. The records are unclear. But when I saw that mark on your skin, it was like seeing a ghost. Silence fell. Lyra didn't know what to say. Her entire life, she'd been taught that vampires were monsters, that the serpent mark was a symbol of divine duty. To hunt, to destroy. But the way Rael spoke of it, the mark sounded sacred. He turned to her again, his gaze softer now. Tell me, Lyra, are you a spy? Did your people send you here? No, she said quickly. I was captured in one of your raids. I was assigned to serve at the palace. I'm just a maid. Rael's eyes narrowed slightly. You're lying. She hesitated. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. You were trained, weren't you? I saw how you moved when you tried to escape earlier. Too careful for a servant. Lyra's pulse quickened. If you think I'm a threat, then kill me, she said suddenly, surprising even herself. I'm tired of being afraid. Rael studied her for a long moment. Then, instead of answering, he said softly, sit. She didn't move. That wasn't a request. Slowly, she obeyed, lowering herself onto a chair near the fire. Rael sat opposite her, his elbows resting on his knees. The light from the flames danced in his eyes. You're different, he said at last. You fear us, yet you don't cower. You should be shaking. Maybe I am, she said quietly. I just don't show it. A faint smile ghosted across his lips. Brave or foolish? Both, she replied. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Rael said, the court will not forgive what they saw tonight. They'll demand your execution at dawn. Lyra's hands clenched on her lap. Then why haven't you done it yourself? Rael leaned back, watching her carefully. Because I need to know why fate put that mark on you. She met his gaze, heart pounding. And if I can't give you the answer, then, he said quietly, I'll find another reason to keep you alive. His words lingered in the air, half threat, half promise. Lyra didn't know whether to fear him or trust him. But one thing was certain. Her life had just changed forever. Morning came gray and cold over the Crimson Palace. Outside Lyra's narrow window, the mist rolled like smoke across the gardens, blurring the marble statues into ghostly shapes. She hadn't slept. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the feast again. Blood spilling, fangs bared, Rael's voice freezing the room. When the heavy door opened, she jumped. A maid entered silently and placed a folded dress of soft gray silk on the chair. His Highness commands that you wear this and meet him in the library, the maid said, not meeting Lyra's eyes. Commands? Lyra asked, trying to sound braver than she felt. The maid only bowed and left, locking the door behind her. Lyra stared at the dress. It was beautiful but wrong, too fine for a servant. Was it a gesture of kindness or a test? She washed quickly, dressed, and let the guards lead her through the echoing corridors. The library smelled of paper and rain. Books climbed the walls to the vaulted ceiling. At the far end, Prince Rael stood by the window, a cup of dark liquid in his hand. Morning light made his pale skin look almost human. You kept me alive, Lyra said before he could speak. Why? He didn't turn around. Because I hate repeating history, he said quietly. Sit. She remained standing. History. Rael set the cup down and faced her. When I saw your mark, I thought it was a trick. That symbol nearly destroyed our world once. My father believes it's cursed. What does it really mean? She asked. He studied her for a moment. The serpent mark was once worn by mediators, humans chosen to keep the balance between our species. They could cross both worlds. But centuries ago, one betrayed that trust and slaughtered an entire vampire sanctuary. Lyra frowned. That's not what I was taught. We were told vampires attacked first. Rael's mouth curved in a bitter half-smile. Exactly. 2 stories. 2 truth. And somewhere in between, the real one rotted away. He moved closer, close enough for her to see the faint shadows beneath his eyes. When I was a child, my tutor showed me an old painting of a woman with your mark. My father forbade me to ask about her. He said she caused the night of burning blood. The massacre, Lyra whispered. He nodded. But when I found the original scrolls years later, I discovered she tried to prevent the war. The attack began only after she vanished. Someone wanted both sides to hate forever. Lyra's pulse quickened. Who? That, he said, is what I intend to learn. And you, Lyra Vance, might be the key. She backed away a step. I'm no key. I'm just a person who wants to go home. There's no home left for you, Rael said softly. By now every vampire in this palace knows what you are. The humans who sent you here will think you've betrayed them. The only safe place left is beside me. The way he said it made her skin prickle. Safe beside a vampire prince. He allowed himself a thin smile. Irony is the only luxury left to either of us. A silence stretched between them. Then Rael motioned toward a table piled with old parchments. These records speak of an order older than your hunters, the keepers of the coil. They protected both species. The last keeper bore your mark. He pushed one scroll toward her. Faded ink showed the same serpent design twined around symbols of moon and sun. Read the words beneath, he said. I can't, she admitted. It's in your language. Then I'll read it for you. He traced the line with a gloved finger. Where the coil is broken, blood shall blind both moon and sun until the mark returns in human form. He looked up. You see, the mark always returns. Perhaps you were born to finish what she began. Lyra felt the ground tilt under her. I'm not chosen. I'm cursed. Everyone I cared about is dead because of this thing. Rael's expression softened. Then maybe the curse and the calling are the same. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. Tell me, Lyra Vance, if I release you now, what will you do? She hesitated. Run. Where? She didn't answer. Exactly, he said. So until I know the truth, you'll remain here. As my ward, not my prisoner. She met his gaze. And if I refuse? He gave the faintest shrug. Then the court will take you, and you'll wish you hadn't. His words were calm, but something flickered behind them. Fear, maybe, or guilt. Finally, he added, there's a council tonight. They'll demand your execution. I'll delay it, but I need you to trust me. I don't trust vampires, she said. Then trust survival, he replied. And with that, he turned back to the window, watching the mist swallow the garden statues one by one. That evening, the council gathered in the obsidian chamber. Lyra wasn't allowed inside, but from the corridor she heard their voices. Sharp, cold, angry. She carries the serpent mark. Bring back the executions of old. The prince is bewitched. The doors burst open. Rael stepped out. His expression like a mask carved from ice. The nobles behind him were silent, frightened by whatever they'd seen in his eyes. He stopped before Lyra. They wanted your head. I gave them mine instead. Her stomach dropped. What do you mean? I took responsibility for you. Your life is bound to mine now. If they kill you, they kill their heir. Why would you do that? She whispered. Rael looked down the hall where the nobles watched from the shadows. Because, he said quietly, I've spent centuries fighting for a throne that means nothing. Maybe you'll help me fight for something that does. He walked away before she could answer. The next 2 days passed under a storm of whispers. Everywhere Lyra went, servants stopped talking. Guards followed her like shadows. Some glared with hunger, others with hatred. On the morning of the 3rd day, she woke to shouting outside her door. She cracked it open just enough to hear. Orders from the emperor himself, a soldier said. He wants the girl moved to the dungeons before sunset. Rael's voice answered, calm but deadly. You will obey my command, not my father's. She's dangerous, the soldier protested. She's under my protection, Rael said. Try to touch her, and you'll learn how dangerous I am. The footsteps retreated. Lyra exhaled shakily. For the first time she realized how much risk Rael had taken for her. Later he appeared in her doorway. He looked tired, his black coat unbuttoned, a faint bruise visible at his collar. You heard, he said. I did. My father believes keeping you alive is weakness. He's preparing to summon me to answer for it. Then why not let them take me? Rael leaned against the doorframe. Because I need you breathing long enough to prove the emperor wrong. He crossed the room and handed her a small blade, its hilt wrapped in dark cloth. Silvered steel, he said. For protection. Keep it hidden. You trust me with a weapon, she asked. He gave a thin smile. If you wanted me dead, you could have tried last night while I slept in the chamber next to yours. I thought about it, she said, surprising them both. Rael laughed quietly, a real laugh, deep and strange. Honesty. How refreshing. Then more seriously he added, tonight there's a feast to honor the old victories. The court will be drunk on power and blood. I'll use that distraction to show you something. That night, the palace blazed with light again. Trumpets echoed through the halls, and the scent of spiced blood wine filled the air. Lyra stood at the edge of the crowd, dressed once more as a servant, her hidden blade pressed against her thigh. Rael appeared beside her. Follow me and keep your head down. He led her through a side door into a passage lit by cold blue torches. The noise of the feast faded behind them. Where are we going? She whispered. To the catacombs, where our true history sleeps. They descended spiral stairs that seemed to go on forever. At the bottom, the air grew damp and heavy with the scent of stone. Rael stopped before a huge iron gate carved with serpents. He pressed his palm against the metal. It glowed faintly, then opened with a groan. Inside was a circular chamber filled with murals, humans and vampires side by side, sharing light and blood. At the center stood a stone pedestal holding a cracked crystal tablet etched with ancient writing. This is what my father once buried, Rael said. It tells of the first covenant. The serpent mark was the seal between our kinds. Lyra stepped closer, tracing the carvings. They look happy. They were, he said. Until the night the sky burned. What happened? No one knows. The records above say the humans attacked. These walls say otherwise. He handed her a lantern. Look closer. She held the light over the lower carvings. Beneath the images of peace came scenes of shadowy figures cloaked in smoke, striking both humans and vampires. The same glowing weapons she'd seen in Rael's books gleamed in their hands. Who are they? She whispered. The ones who profit from war, he said. The Wraithborn. They whisper to both sides, feeding hatred. Lyra stared at the mural, heart racing. Then the war, everything was built on a lie. Rael's voice was grim. A lie old enough that even my father believes it. They stood in silence, surrounded by the ghosts of the past. Then Lyra said, If your father learns we came here, he'll kill us both, Rael finished. That's why you must decide tonight. Will you help me expose the truth, or keep running? She looked up at him. The torchlight reflected in his gray eyes like molten silver. If I help you, what happens to me when the truth comes out? You live, he said simply. And maybe, for once, so will we. Before she could answer, a deep rumble shook the floor. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere above, a horn blared. Rael's expression hardened. They've found us. How? My father has spies everywhere. He seized her hand. This way. They ran through a narrow corridor as the chamber collapsed behind them. Firelight flared ahead guards. Rael drew his blade, moving faster than her eyes could follow, cutting through them with effortless precision. One guard managed to grab Lyra's arm. Pain flared as claws tore her sleeve, exposing the mark again. It blazed silver, brighter than before. The guard screamed as smoke rose from his flesh. Rael stared at her arm in shock. The mark, it reacted. She gasped, clutching her wrist. It burns. Then maybe it's waking up, he said. And we need to know why. They reached the surface through a servant tunnel that opened behind the stables. Night rain drenched them instantly. Lyra turned to him, breathless. Your father won't stop now. No, Rael said, eyes fixed on the storm-lit horizon. He'll send hunters of his own. But let him come. For the first time in 300 years, we have the truth, and a spark worth dying for. Lyra met his gaze. For the first time, she saw not a predator but a man carrying the weight of centuries. Then I'll help you, she said. But not because I trust you. Because I need answers too. Rael gave a slow nod. Fair enough. Lightning flashed, outlining the towers of the palace like fangs biting the sky. Come, he said. Before dawn we start a war of our own. And as they disappeared into the storm, the mark on her wrist pulsed once. Bright as fire, alive as breath. The rain didn't stop for 2 days. Thunder rolled across the crimson mountains while the palace trembled beneath it. In the hidden room below the old stables, Lyra and Rael took refuge among barrels and crates, waiting for the guard's search to fade. Lyra sat by the small fire they had built from broken planks. The flames painted her face in soft gold. The serpent mark on her wrist glowed faintly even in the dark, like it had a heartbeat of its own. He turned to Rael. It hasn't stopped since that night, she whispered. It won't, he said quietly, studying the mark. The crystal tablet you touched in the catacombs must have awakened it. So now what? It just burns forever. Perhaps until it remembers its purpose. Lyra gave a tired laugh. You speak like the mark has a mind. Maybe it does, he replied. Ancient symbols were never just decoration. They were oaths. He leaned back against the wall, his black hair damp, his eyes pale as moonlight. We need to reach the old library tower, he said. That's where the Emperor keeps the forbidden archives. If there are records about the Wraithborn or the First Covenant, they'll be there. Lyra frowned. Your father will have guards everywhere. Of course, Rael said. That's why we go now, while he believes we're still in the lower city. They moved before dawn. Cloaked in shadows, they crossed the inner courtyard where the rain had turned the marble slick. The palace slept, save for the occasional patrol of armored sentries. Each time they passed one, Rael's hand tightened around Lyra's wrist until the danger slipped by. At last they reached the tower, an ancient spire rising high above the rest of the palace. The iron doors at its base were chained shut. Rael drew a dagger and pressed the blade against the lock. His blood hissed where it touched the metal, and the chain fell apart with a dull clang. Lyra looked at him, startled. Your blood melts steel. He gave a half-smile. Old family trick. Try not to tell anyone. Inside, the air was dry and heavy with dust. Rows of scrolls and books stretched upward into darkness. Cobwebs draped over staircases like torn curtains. Stay close, Rael said, lighting a torch. The Emperor sealed this place a century ago. There are wards even I don't understand. As they climbed, Lyra ran her fingers over the spines of old tomes. Many were written in languages she didn't recognize, some not even human. She stopped at one shelf where the dust looked freshly disturbed. Someone's been here recently. Rael joined her, frowning. My father, perhaps. Or someone working for him? They pushed deeper until they reached the highest level, a circular room beneath the tower's glass dome. Lightning flashed above, casting brief blue light across a table covered in parchment and bones. Lyra felt her stomach twist. What is this? Rael examined the bones carefully. Human. Small frame. Possibly a scholar from the Old Alliance. Among the remains lay a cracked journal. Lyra picked it up, brushing off centuries of dust. On the first page was a sketch of the serpent mark, identical to hers. Below it, words written in elegant, slanted script. The coil was never meant for war. It is the bridge between the living and the eternal. Rael read over her shoulder. This handwriting. I know it. It's hers. Who? Alara. The woman from the old painting. His voice softened. The one who bore the mark before you. He flipped further. The next page contained a half-finished drawing of a map. Mountain ranges, rivers, a symbol marking a location deep in the north. Beneath it, Vault of the Dawn, sealed by blood and serpent. That must be where the Wraithborn came from, Lyra said. Rael nodded. If we find this vault, we find the truth. A low growl echoed behind them. They spun around. From the shadows emerged a tall figure in crimson armor, one of the royal enforcers. His eyes glowed faint gold, his fangs bared. Prince Rael, the guard said, his voice metallic. By order of the Emperor, you are under arrest for treason. The human dies. Rael stepped in front of Lyra. If you want her, you'll have to kill me first. The guard drew his sword, black as obsidian. Gladly. He lunged. Rael met him with supernatural speed. Steel clashed, sparks flying. The fight was silent but deadly, every movement a blur. The guard was strong, but Rael fought with precision. Each strike aimed to disable, not destroy. Lyra backed away, clutching the journal. Then she saw the mark on her wrist flaring again, light spilling from beneath her sleeve. Rael, she shouted. The glow burst outward. A wave of silver light swept the room. The guard screamed as the energy struck him, his body disintegrating into ash. When the light faded, silence returned. Rael turned to her slowly, breathing hard. That wasn't me. I know, she whispered, staring at her own hand. The mark was still pulsing, bright as a small sun. I think it protected us. Or warned us, he said grimly. Either way, we can't stay. He tore a page from the journal, the map, and tucked it into his coat. We head north tonight. Lyra looked back once at the ruined tower, the ash still drifting through the air like snow. Your father won't stop hunting us. I know, Rael said. But if we find the Vault of the Dawn first, maybe he'll have no reason left to fight. She almost laughed. You really think truth can stop a war? Rael's expression was unreadable. No. But maybe it can start something better. By the time they reached the edge of the city, dawn had already begun to stain the sky. Behind them the palace bells rang out. An alarm. They've found the bodies, Rael said. We have until sunset before the hunts begin. And after sunset. He gave her a wry look. Then we run faster. The forest beyond the Crimson Mountains was thick and endless, full of ancient trees whose branches tangled like claws. The air smelled of pine and rain. For the first time in weeks, there was no sound of soldiers' boots or the clang of armor. Only wind. Lyra followed Rael along a hidden path marked with faint runes. Her boots sank into the soft earth. You've been here before, she guessed. He nodded. When I was younger, I used these paths to escape palace life. Sometimes even princes need air. He stopped beside a fallen tree. Rest a moment. She sat, rubbing her sore feet. You don't tire, do you? Not easily, he said with a faint grin. But I remember when I used to. For a moment neither spoke. The quiet between them was almost peaceful. Then Rael said, when you used your mark in the tower, did you feel anything? Pain. Like anger, she said slowly. Like something inside me wanted out. That's how the old records described it, he said. A weapon of truth. It reveals what hides in darkness. Then maybe we should use it on your father, she said. Rael's smile faded. If only it were that simple. My father is not just cruel, he's clever. He's been preparing for this since long before I was born. They resumed walking. By nightfall, they reached the ruins of an old monastery carved into the cliffs. Vines had claimed its towers, and the courtyard was littered with fallen statues. This was once a keeper's stronghold, Rael said. Before the wars. They set up camp inside the crumbling hall. The moon shone through a broken dome, bathing everything in silver. Lyra lit a small fire while Rael examined the carvings on the walls. Here, he said, brushing away moss. It's the serpent again, see? But look what it's wrapped around. Lyra leaned in. The carving showed two figures, one human, one vampire, standing on either side of a coiled serpent that linked their hands. Above them, symbols of flame and moonlight intertwined. Unity, she whispered. Rael nodded. The last time our people stood together. He found a second inscription and began reading it aloud. Beware the whisperers who feed the coil with lies. They wear many faces, but their hearts are hollow. When the serpent sleeps, the world burns. Lyra shivered. The Wraithborn again. Before Rael could reply, a faint rustle echoed through the hall. He froze. We're not alone. Figures moved among the shadows, pale shapes with glimmering eyes. Lyra reached for her blade. From the darkness stepped a man she didn't expect to see. His coat was torn, his face scarred, but she recognized him instantly. Commander Dane, she breathed. You were with the human resistance. And you, he said coldly, were supposed to be one of us. Yet here you are, running with a vampire. Rael stepped forward. She's no prisoner. She's under my protection. Dane's eyes narrowed. Protection. From what truth? We saw the palace burn. You're the reason our settlements fell. That wasn't us, Lyra said quickly. There's something else, something controlling both sides. He raised a hand, cutting her off. Save your stories. You're both coming with me. The soldiers behind him leveled their crossbows. Rael's voice was calm. If you fire, I won't stop until you're all dead. Dane sneered. Try me. The first bolt flew. Rael blurred forward, knocking it aside. Chaos erupted. Arrows whistled, swords clashed. Lyra ducked behind a pillar, heart racing. When one soldier lunged at her, she slashed with her silver blade. Cut through his weapon like paper. He fell with a gasp. Rael fought like a storm. Swift, merciless, but controlled. Yet there were too many. For every soldier that fell, two more appeared. Then Lyra felt the mark burning again. Hotter than ever. No, not now. The light exploded from her wrist, flooding the hall. The soldiers screamed, clutching their eyes. When it faded, only a few were left standing, and among them she saw something horrifying. Their faces were wrong. Black veins crawled up their necks, their eyes shimmering with unnatural silver. Rael's voice turned sharp. Wraithborn puppets. The creatures hissed and attacked again, faster now, their bodies moving like smoke. Lyra fought beside Rael, every swing of her blade slicing through shadow. When the last one fell, silence returned, broken only by the sound of their breathing. Dane lay dying on the floor, his eyes flickering between human and silver. He reached toward Lyra. We thought we were fighting for freedom, he rasped. But they used us. Who? Lyra demanded. His gaze went distant. The ones beneath the dawn. Then he went still. Rael knelt beside him, frowning. Beneath the dawn, the vault. Lyra looked at him, realization dawning. The map. The mark. It's all leading us there. Rael nodded. And now we know what we're fighting. He stood and looked at her, his face smeared with ash and blood. We can't turn back now, Lyra. Whatever lies inside that vault will end this war, or start one greater than the world has ever seen. Lyra's hand trembled around her blade. The serpent mark still glowed faintly, pulsing with her heartbeat. "Then we find it," she said. "Before the shadows do." Rael looked toward the horizon, where the first streaks of dawn touched the sky. "Then we travel at night. The war of whispers has already begun." They turned north into the mist, where the mountains cut the world like jagged teeth. And somewhere beyond those peaks, the vault of the dawn waited, along with the secrets buried in blood and time. The next 3 nights were spent climbing through the northern mountains. The path grew steeper, the air colder, the trees thinner. The moon was their only light, and every shadow seemed to move when they weren't looking. Lyra's fingers were numb around the hilt of her silver dagger. She could feel the mark pulsing under her sleeve, slow, steady, alive. Rael walked ahead of her, silent except for the crunch of snow beneath his boots. "How far to this vault?" she finally asked. He didn't turn. "Another day. Maybe 2. That's what you said yesterday." He glanced back, half smiling. "Then I was only half wrong." She glared at him, but there was no heat in it. Somewhere between running from soldiers and fighting shadow creatures, they'd fallen into a rhythm. 1 step ahead of death, 1 word away from trust. That night, they made camp in the ruins of an old watchtower. The stones were cracked and blackened, as if struck by lightning centuries ago. Lyra built a small fire while Rael stood on the tower's edge, watching the horizon. "Do you ever sleep?" she asked. "Rarely. Because you can't, or because you're afraid of what you'll dream about?" He turned slightly, his profile lit by the flickering fire. "Both." Lyra poked the flames with a stick. "You dream about the wars. I dream about silence," he said quietly. "The kind that comes after everyone you cared for is gone." She hesitated. "And do you ever think, maybe you deserve that silence?" Rael looked at her then, not angry, not hurt, just tired. "Every day." For a long time neither spoke. The wind howled through the ruins, and somewhere far below, a wolf cried out. Finally Lyra said, "When I was little, my father used to tell stories of the great vampire king, the one who drank sunlight and wept silver tears. I thought they were bedtime myths." Rael smiled faintly. "They were. Until he tried to make them true. My father's grandfather believed if he consumed enough human blood blessed by sunlight, he could walk in the day. It destroyed half our court and left him blind." "Your people sound mad," she said softly. He chuckled. "We are what war made us." She looked up at him. "You're different." His smile faded. "No. I'm just tired of pretending monsters can't want peace." The words lingered between them, heavier than the cold. After a while, Lyra unrolled her blanket near the fire. "Wake me if something tries to kill us," she muttered. Rael's voice came softly through the dark. "Something always will." But when she fell asleep, he stayed by the fire until dawn, his gaze never leaving her face. When morning came, the mountains glowed gold under the first light. They followed a narrow path carved along a cliff's edge. Far below, rivers of mist wound through the valleys. Halfway up the trail, Lyra stopped. "Do you hear that?" Rael turned. "Hear what?" A low rumble cut through the air. The ground trembled. Snow slid from the rocks above them. "Move!" Rael shouted. An avalanche roared down from the peak. He grabbed Lyra and pulled her against the cliff wall as the snow thundered past. The force knocked them both to the ground. When the noise finally stopped, Rael pushed himself up, covered in frost. "You all right?" "I think so," she gasped, brushing snow from her hair. Then she noticed something, a crack in the cliff wall, where the snow had broken away. Behind it, a faint light pulsed like a heartbeat. "Rael," she whispered, pointing. "Look." He moved closer, brushing the loose stone aside. Beneath it was a carved door, covered in the same serpent symbols as her mark. "The vault," he said, his voice low. "We found it." They pushed the heavy stone door open. A gust of cold air rushed out, carrying the scent of dust and something ancient. The tunnel beyond glowed faintly with blue veins of crystal embedded in the rock. As they descended, the air grew warmer, almost alive. Their footsteps echoed. The passage opened into a massive chamber lit by floating orbs of pale light. In the center stood a circular platform surrounded by pillars etched with runes. "This place," Lyra breathed. "It's beautiful." Rael walked ahead, his expression cautious. "Or dangerous." At the center of the platform lay a pedestal, and on it rested a smooth crystal sphere. Inside the sphere swirled silver mist, and faint images that moved like memories trapped in glass. Lyra stepped closer. "What is it?" Rael's voice was almost reverent. "A memory stone. From before the war." She reached out. "Do you think it still works?" "Lyra, wait." Her fingers brushed the surface. The world shifted. Suddenly she wasn't standing in the vault anymore. She was in a sunlit courtyard, surrounded by laughter and music. Humans and vampires walked side by side, smiling, trading gifts. And in the middle of it all stood a woman with hair like fire and calm, kind eyes. On her wrist gleamed the serpent mark. Rael stood beside her, younger, his eyes brighter. The woman reached for him, touching his cheek. "We can make peace last, Rael," she said. "If they trust us." The scene shattered into light. Lyra stumbled backward, gasping. The sphere dimmed. Rael caught her before she fell. His voice was soft but strained. "You saw her." "Alara," Lyra whispered. You were with her." He looked away, jaw tight. "Yes. She was human." "Yes. And you loved her." He closed his eyes. "And I killed her." Lyra froze. "What?" His voice cracked. "The night of the betrayal. I thought she'd led the attack. When I found her among the dead, I realized too late she'd been trying to stop it. The war began because of my mistake." The silence that followed was unbearable. Finally Lyra said, "That's why you spared me." Rael met her eyes. "Because when I saw the mark again, your mark, I thought fate was giving me a second chance." She didn't know what to say. The man before her, the monster she'd been taught to hate, looked utterly human in that moment. And against all reason, she reached out and touched his hand. "Then don't waste it," she whispered. They left the vault before sunset, carrying only the map and the memory stone. Neither spoke as they descended the mountain. The air between them was full of ghosts. By the time they reached the valley, the sky was burning red. Smoke rose in the distance, thick, black, spreading fast. Rael stopped dead. "That's the northern outpost," he said. "My people guard that border." They ran. When they reached the outpost, the scene before them was chaos. The gates were torn apart, the walls scorched by green fire. Bodies lay everywhere, vampires and humans alike. Lyra's stomach twisted. "Who did this?" Rael knelt beside one of the corpses. The flesh was gray, the veins blackened. "Not human weapons. Not ours either." A weak voice called from the rubble. "Help, please." Lyra rushed over. It was a young vampire soldier, his armor scorched. She knelt beside him. "What happened here?" He coughed. "They came from the mist, wearing masks. They moved like shadows." "Wraithborn," Rael murmured. The soldier grabbed Lyra's sleeve weakly. They said the mark has awakened. That the key must not reach the dawn." Before she could ask what he meant, his hand fell limp. Lyra looked at Rael. "They're hunting me." "Not you," he said. "What you carry." Thunder cracked overhead. From the smoke, dark shapes began to appear. Tall, cloaked figures, their eyes glowing white. Rael drew his sword. "Stay behind me." The first shadow moved like smoke, its weapon leaving trails of light. Rael blocked the strike, sparks flying. Lyra pulled her dagger and slashed at another. The silver cut through the shadow's form, leaving a scream that wasn't human. More came. Rael fought with inhuman speed, his blade slicing arcs of light through the dark. Lyra felt the mark ignite again, burning so hot she cried out. Silver light burst from her wrist, forming a shield between them and the attackers. The shadows recoiled, hissing. Rael shouted over the noise. "It's reacting to them. Use it." "I don't know how." "Then feel it." She focused, letting the heat spread through her arm. The light flared brighter, sweeping outward like a wave. The shadows screamed as they disintegrated into smoke. When it was over, the ground was littered with ashes. Rael lowered his sword, breathing hard. "You did it." Lyra sank to her knees, exhausted. "I didn't mean to." He knelt beside her, his gloved hand brushing the mark. "It's bonded to you now. It responds to your will." She looked up at him, eyes wide. "If that's true, then maybe I can stop them." Rael shook his head. "Not yet. They're growing stronger and so is the mark. If we don't learn to control it, it will consume you." Lyra swallowed hard. "Then teach me." He hesitated. "Vampire magic is different. It's not meant for human blood." "Then find a way," she said fiercely. "Because I'm not dying before I find out why they're doing this." Rael's gaze softened, pride flickering behind the exhaustion. "Very well. We'll start tonight." They built a small camp near the ruined outpost. The night air was sharp, carrying the scent of ash and rain. Rael sat across from Lyra, tracing runes into the dirt with his dagger. "These are focus symbols," he explained. "They channel energy into shape. When you use the mark, it's pure chaos, instinct. We need control." Lyra copied the runes with a stick. "Like this. Good. Now close your eyes. Feel the mark, not the burn but what lies beneath it. Pulse. The rhythm." She did. For a moment there was only silence. Then, faintly, she felt it, a heartbeat that wasn't hers, steady and deep. "Now draw it out," Rael said. "Let it answer you." The mark glowed faintly. Silver light crept up her arm, gentle this time. "Good," he murmured. "Now stop." She opened her eyes. The light faded. "That's it. For now. You push too far, you'll burn yourself out. Power demands respect, not pride." He smirked. "You sound like my father." Then he was a wise man. "He was stubborn," she said softly. "He died believing he was right." Rael looked into the fire. "Then let's make sure neither of us dies wrong." Sometime before dawn, Lyra woke to a strange quiet. Rael sat a few feet away, staring into the dying fire. "You should rest," she said. He didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the horizon. "Rael." He turned to her, his eyes reflecting the faint light of the flames. "They won't stop, Lyra. The Wraithborn, my father, even your people, they all fear what the mark means. If they can't control it, they'll destroy it, and you with it. Then we stay ahead of them." He nodded slowly. "We'll need allies, those who still believe peace is possible." "Do they exist?" He smiled faintly. "We'll find out." The first rays of dawn touched the mountains, turning the snow to gold. Rael rose and offered her his hand. "Come, serpent-bearer. The world won't change itself." She took it, and together they walked toward the light, unaware that in the shadows far behind them, unseen eyes watched and followed. They reached the northern plains by nightfall, a stretch of open land beneath a silver sky. The air smelled of frost and wild grass, and for the first time in weeks, the wind didn't carry smoke or blood. Rael and Lyra found shelter in an abandoned stone chapel at the edge of the forest. Its roof had fallen in long ago, leaving the stars exposed like cold candles in the heavens. The cracked walls still held faint carvings, old prayers written in both human and vampire script. As Lyra unpacked her cloak and set up a small fire, Rael stood at the altar, running his hand over the faded symbols. "This place belonged to the keepers," he murmured, "before everything turned to ruin." Lyra tilted her head. "You mean before your people burned it down?" He gave her a sharp look, then sighed. "Yes. My ancestors believed if they erased history, they could erase guilt." She sat by the fire. "That never works." "No," he said softly. It only buries the truth until it festers. For a while neither spoke. The flames crackled between them. Outside, the wind moaned through the empty fields. Lyra finally asked, "What happens if we fail? If the Wraithborn find the vault first?" Rael turned from the altar. His grey eyes caught the firelight, glowing faintly like polished steel. "Then your world ends first. Then mine follows." "That's comforting," she said dryly. He walked closer, kneeling beside her. "I'm not here to comfort you. I'm here to prepare you." She met his gaze. "Then prepare me." Rael hesitated, as if weighing his words. "The mark isn't just a weapon. It's a bond. Ties you to every bearer before you. That power will keep growing until it consumes you or connects you." "Connects me to what?" "To someone who can balance it," he said. "The serpent is two halves, life and death, light and shadow. One cannot exist without the other." Lyra frowned. "You're saying I need a vampire to survive?" He gave a ghost of a smile. "You already have one." Her heart stuttered in her chest. "You?" "Perhaps," he said quietly. "Or perhaps fate just enjoys irony." She looked away, trying to ignore the heat rising in her cheeks. "So what do we do now? Meditate until enlightenment?" "No," Rael stood, drawing a small blade from his belt. "We train." He tossed the blade at her feet. "Defend yourself." She blinked. "You're serious?" "Always." He lunged without warning. She barely had time to snatch up the dagger before his strike met hers. The clash rang through the ruined chapel. Lyra ducked his next swing and countered, but he caught her wrist mid-motion, twisting until the dagger slipped from her grip. In one motion he spun her around, her back pressed against his chest, his arm pinning hers. "Too predictable," he whispered near her ear. "You think like a human. You fight to win. You should fight to survive." Her breath caught. "Let go." He hesitated for half a heartbeat, then did. She spun and shoved him, fury and confusion mixing. "You call this training?" "You're angry," he said calmly. "Good. Use it. You nearly broke my arm. And now you know I could," he said. "Next time make sure I don't." Before she could answer, a strange hum filled the air, faint at first, then rising into a sharp vibration. The fire sputtered. Rael's head snapped up. "Someone's here." Shadows flickered along the wall. Lyra grabbed her dagger. But when the shape stepped into the light, she froze. It was a woman, tall, cloaked in silver gray, her skin almost translucent. Her eyes glowed faint blue. Rael's expression hardened. "Who sent you?" The woman smiled faintly. "You did. Long ago." Lyra frowned. "What are you talking about?" The woman's voice was soft but carried strange weight. "I am Lysara, a keeper spirit bound to the serpent line. I was born of the mark's magic. When you touched the memory stone, you woke me." Rael stepped between her and Lyra. "What do you want?" "The same thing you do, survival." She looked at Lyra. "The Wraithborn grow stronger. They've already infiltrated the vampire court. Your father is not himself, Rael." Rael's eyes narrowed. "You're lying." The spirit shook her head. "He bears the shadow within him now. He leads armies in the name of peace but serves the darkness beneath it." Lyra's stomach turned cold. "So even the Emperor is a puppet," Lysara said. "And when the shadow fully takes him, the war will end, because there will be nothing left to fight for." Rael clenched his fists. "Then how do we stop it?" "By finishing what Alara began," she said, her gaze fixed on Lyra. "By merging the halves of the serpent once more." Lyra swallowed. "What does that mean?" "The bond must be sealed," Lysara whispered. "Human and vampire. Blood and light. Two hearts, one mark." The firelight flickered violently, and then the spirit was gone. Lyra turned to Rael, shaken. "You knew something like this might happen, didn't you?" "I hoped it wouldn't." "So now what?" Rael's voice dropped to a near whisper. Now we decide if we trust destiny, or fight it. Their eyes met, the air between them heavy with something unspoken. Then slowly Rael reached for her hand. If we bond, there's no turning back. I know, she said. He hesitated only a moment longer before leaning in. His lips brushed hers, hesitant, testing. The mark on her wrist flared with silver fire, and for a heartbeat, she saw flashes. Alara and Rael centuries ago, standing in sunlight, smiling before it all went wrong. When the vision faded, Rael pulled back, breathing hard. It's begun, he whispered. Lyra's voice trembled. What have we done? Rael looked toward the horizon. We've given the world one last chance. The next evening they reached the borderlands, a vast expanse of red earth and ancient ruins that marked the edge of the vampire kingdom. Beyond lay the Black Fortress, where the Emperor ruled. They hadn't planned to go there, but Lysara's warning echoed in both their minds. If your father's been taken, Lyra said quietly as they approached the fortress, we have to know. Rael nodded grimly. Be ready for anything. The fortress gates loomed high, carved from obsidian and etched with silver runes that pulsed faintly. The guards recognized Rael immediately, bowing low. My prince, one said. The Emperor commands your presence in the throne hall. Rael shot Lyra a quick look. He already knows we're here. They followed the guards inside. The hall was enormous, a cathedral of shadow and flame. Vampires lined either side of the black marble floor, their eyes gleaming red in the torchlight. At the far end sat the Emperor himself, tall, regal, and motionless upon his throne. His crown glimmered like frost, but his eyes were wrong. Too bright, too empty. Father, Rael said, bowing slightly. Son, the Emperor replied, his voice calm, almost kind. You've returned. And you bring the girl. Lyra bowed stiffly. The weight of his gaze felt like ice pressing into her skin. Rael straightened. I came for answers. Answers, the Emperor repeated. Or absolution. Rael frowned. What have you done? The Emperor rose slowly. What I must. The Wraithborn have shown me the truth. There is no peace between predator and prey. There is only survival. Lyra's heart pounded. You've sided with them. His gaze snapped to her, sharp as a blade. You speak to me as though you understand eternity, child. The mark you carry belongs to death, not life. Rael stepped in front of her. She's the key to saving us, not destroying us. The Emperor's expression softened into a strange smile. Ah, so you've bonded. How poetic. My son repeating history's greatest mistake. Rael's jaw tightened. If Alara was a mistake, then perhaps mistakes are what your world needs. A ripple of anger moved through the gathered nobles. The Emperor descended the steps, his presence overwhelming. Alara's betrayal cost thousands of lives, he hissed. And now you bring her shadow into my hall. She didn't betray you, Rael said coldly. You killed her to hide your own weakness. The Emperor struck him. The sound echoed like thunder. Rael staggered but didn't fall. You dare accuse your king. Rael wiped blood from his lip. You stopped being king when you let them inside your head. Lyra saw it then, the faint shimmer around the Emperor's skin, like smoke trapped beneath glass. The same silver veins that had marked the possessed soldiers. He's infected, she whispered. The Emperor heard. He turned toward her, smiling darkly. You see too much, little serpent. He raised his hand. Black fire burst from his palm, streaking toward her. Rael moved instinctively, pushing her aside. The blast hit him full in the chest, throwing him across the hall. Rael, she screamed. He crashed against a pillar, the impact cracking stone. He groaned, blood dripping from his mouth. The Emperor advanced slowly. The mark will die with you, girl. The world will finally be free of its false hope. Lyra forced herself to her feet, her wrist burning. The mark pulsed like a heartbeat. You're wrong, she said through clenched teeth. The mark isn't death. It's balance. She raised her arm. Light erupted, filling the hall. The vampires shrieked, covering their eyes. The emperor staggered back, hissing as the light touched him. And for a split second the shadow flickered, revealing the face of a weary old man beneath it. "Father," Rael gasped. The emperor's expression twisted in pain. "End it before it takes me completely." Rael rose unsteadily, his sword trembling in his hands. "I can't." "You must," his father whispered. "For both our worlds." The shadow roared, surging outward, reclaiming him. Lyra caught Rael's arm. "Do it." He looked at her, agony in his eyes. Then he drove his sword through his father's heart. The hall went still. The shadow shrieked, dissolving into mist that vanished into the air. The emperor fell to his knees, his eyes clearing. "My son," he murmured. "I see now, the dawn returns." Then he was gone. Rael stood frozen, his sword buried in the stone floor, his breath ragged. Lyra placed a hand on his arm. "You did what he asked." He looked at her, eyes hollow. "I killed my father." "You freed him," she said softly. "You freed everyone." But even as she spoke, she could feel it, a ripple in the air like distant thunder. The mark on her wrist flared again, brighter than before. Rael's voice was hoarse. "They'll come for us now. The Wraithborn won't let this go unanswered." Lyra nodded. "Then we'll be ready." They turned toward the shattered doors of the fortress. Beyond them, dawn was breaking, pale light creeping over a world forever changed. The crimson sun never truly set over the vampire capital that night. It hung heavy in the sky, bleeding light across the clouds, as if mourning the emperor's death. The city was restless. Whispers spread through every hall and alley. "The king is dead. The prince is cursed. The human carries the mark." Rael and Lyra didn't have long to breathe. The council summoned them before dawn. The great chamber was already full when they arrived. Nobles in jeweled armor, high-born lords who had once sworn loyalty to Rael's father but now stood divided. At the far end of the room sat the Grand Chancellor, Lord Varen, a tall, thin vampire whose eyes gleamed with quiet hatred. "Prince Rael," he said, voice smooth as glass. "You stand accused of regicide, treason, and consorting with the enemy." Rael met his gaze coldly. "My father was consumed by shadow. I freed him." Varen smiled faintly. "You killed him, my lord. And now you expect us to believe it was mercy." A murmur rippled through the room. Lyra stepped forward. "He speaks the truth. The emperor was corrupted by the Wraithborn. I saw it." Varen's lip curled. "The human speaks in our court now. How far our kind has fallen." Rael's voice was like a blade. "You will address her with respect." Varen ignored him and raised a hand. "By ancient law, when the heir stands accused, truth must be proven in blood. I invoke the trial." A chill swept through the hall. Lyra frowned. "What trial?" Rael's eyes darkened. "Trial of blood. One challenger from the council against the accused. To the death. It decides guilt or innocence." Lyra's heart sank. "You can't fight them all." "I won't need to," he said quietly. Varen's smile widened. "Then let it be so. At dusk, the trial begins." They were taken to the old arena at the edge of the city, a vast stone circle, half ruined from forgotten wars. By sunset, the stands were full. Nobles, guards, even commoners came to see their prince bleed. Lyra stood behind the gates, watching as Rael stepped into the sand. His black coat was gone, replaced by armor etched with runes that shimmered faintly in the dying light. He looked like a fallen god, and yet beneath the calm, she could see the weight of grief still in his eyes. The gates on the opposite side opened. Varen stepped out, wielding a curved silver blade. He wore no helmet, only a thin smile. "Do you think killing me will make them follow you?" Rael called across the arena. "I think killing you will save them from you," Varen replied. "A prince who bleeds for humans is no ruler of vampires." The horn sounded. They moved at once, Rail swift, precise, his strikes a blur of steel and flame. Varen met him blow for blow, his blade singing as it cut the air. Sparks flew with every clash. Lyra gripped the bars, her knuckles white. She'd never seen anyone move like them. Each motion a deadly dance, each strike too fast for mortal eyes. Varen lunged low, catching Rail's leg. Blood splattered the sand. Rail staggered but recovered instantly, twisting and slashing upward. His blade bit into Varen's shoulder, sending him reeling. "Yield," Rail said through gritted teeth. Varen spat blood. "Never." He struck again, faster than before, a blur of rage and power. Their swords locked, faces inches apart. "You were always weak," Varen hissed. "Just like your mother, soft for humans." Rail's eyes flashed silver. "You speak her name again, and I'll make sure you regret ever having a tongue." He pushed forward, breaking the lock, and drove his blade through Varen's chest. The crowd gasped. Varen fell to his knees, disbelief in his eyes. "Shadow, take you," he choked, and then crumbled into dust. The silence that followed was deafening. Then someone began to chant, "Rail, Will, Rail." Lyra felt a strange swell of pride and fear. The Grand Counselor rose. "By blood and blade the prince stands proven. The throne is his." Rail turned, his armor stained crimson, his expression unreadable. His gaze met Lyra's through the bars. "It's over," she whispered. But the mark on her wrist pulsed hard. "No," Rail murmured under his breath. "It's only beginning." That night the palace was quiet. Too quiet. Lyra found Rail alone in the throne hall, standing before his father's empty seat. The moonlight poured through the tall windows, painting him in pale light. "You should rest," she said gently. "I can't," he replied. "Every time I close my eyes I see him." She stepped closer. "He asked you to do it. You set him free." "I still took his life," he said, voice hollow. "How do I lead a people who saw me murder their king?" "You don't lead them by fear," she said softly. "You lead them by truth." He turned to face her. "And what if truth kills me?" "Then I'll die beside you," she said before she could stop herself. He blinked, startled. Then slowly, a faint smile curved his lips. "You shouldn't make promises like that." "I mean it." The silence stretched. Heavy, fragile. Rail stepped closer, his voice low. "The bond between us grows stronger. I can feel your heartbeat when you speak." "And I feel your sorrow," she whispered. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Then maybe we share too much." Before either could say more, the doors slammed open. A soldier stumbled in, bloodied and breathless. "My lord! The archives, they're burning." Rail's eyes widened. "What?" "The old records gone. Someone set them alight." Rail grabbed his sword. "Get her to safety," he ordered. "No," Lyra said, gripping his arm. "If the Wraithborn are behind this, they want us apart." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Stay close." They raced through the corridors toward the lower vaults. Smoke filled the air, thick and choking. Flames roared along the shelves of ancient scrolls. Figures moved among the fire, not soldiers but shadows. Their eyes glowed white. "Wraithborn," Rail growled. He cut through them with ruthless precision, his blade flashing. Lyra ducked behind him, clutching her dagger. The heat was unbearable. One of the shadows broke past Rail and lunged at her. She raised her arm instinctively, and the mark flared, silver fire exploding outward. The creature shrieked as it burned to ash. But with the light came a strange vision, brief and disorienting. She saw a woman cloaked in white, standing before a great serpent of light and shadow. A voice echoed in her mind. "When the coil breaks, the world will bleed anew." The vision vanished. Rail caught her before she fell. "Lyra!" "I saw something," she gasped. "A warning." He looked around the burning room. "Then we need to get out before it comes true." They ran through the smoke, bursting into the cold night. Behind them, the archives collapsed in a rain of flame. Rael stared at the destruction, jaw tight. Everything we needed to prove the truth gone. Lyra shook her head. Not everything. The serpent mark remembers. Rael looked at her, realization dawning. Then you hold what the world forgot. The following morning the sky turned red, not from dawn but from fire. Cities across the empire burned. The Wraithborn had begun their advance. Rael gathered what remained of his loyal guard in the war chamber. The map on the table was covered in black markers, strongholds lost overnight. They're moving faster than I thought possible, said Commander Eric, his armor scorched. Every city near the northern border is gone. Rael nodded grimly. They're not conquering, they're cleansing. Lyra stood beside him, her wrists still glowing faintly. They're feeding. The mark showed me they draw strength from death, from fear. Every battle makes them stronger. Eric looked at her uneasily. You speak as if you've seen them inside your mind. I have, she said simply. Rael slammed his hand on the table. Then we can't fight them with swords alone. We need the truth the archives hid. There must be another way. Eric hesitated. There's one thing, my lord. The old temple at Durnhall. It's said to house the last unburned copy of the Keeper Codex. Lyra's eyes widened. The Codex. Alara mentioned it in her writings. It explains the serpent's purpose. Rael looked at Eric. Prepare the horses. We ride at dusk. The temple at Durnhall stood on a cliff overlooking a dead sea. Its black towers pierced the clouds like spears. The air was heavy with mist and the faint smell of salt and decay. Inside, time itself seemed to sleep. Dust lay thick on the floor, and every step echoed like thunder. At the heart of the temple stood a single stone altar. Upon it rested an ancient book bound in pale leather. Lyra reached for it, her fingers trembling. The moment she touched it, the mark on her wrist flared, and the codex opened on its own. Pages turned as if guided by invisible hands, stopping on a single passage written in both blood and gold. She read aloud, her voice barely more than a whisper. When the serpent is sundered, night will devour day. Only the bonded may restore the balance, by shedding blood willingly for both. Rael frowned. Shedding blood. That sounds like sacrifice. It is, said a voice behind them. They turned. Lysara stood in the doorway, her form faint and fading. The serpent's bond was never meant to be power, she said. It was a promise, that one life could bridge two worlds. To restore balance, the bond must be sealed by choice, not fate. Lyra's chest tightened. You mean one of us must die? Not die, Lysara said gently. Transform. The serpent does not destroy its halves. It unites them. But the path is pain. Rael stepped closer to Lyra. If that's what it takes, I'll do it. She shook her head. No. You've already lost enough. And you've already lost your home, he said softly. Let me bear this one. Before they could argue further, a deep rumble shook the temple. Cracks spidered across the ceiling. They've found us, Rael said. The doors exploded inward. Wraithborn soldiers poured through. Dozens of them, their forms shifting like smoke. Rael drew his sword. Get behind me. Lyra grabbed the codex and raised her arm. The mark blazed brighter than ever before, silver fire coursing through her veins. The light spread across the room, burning the shadows away. The Wraithborn screamed, retreating. Lysara's voice rose above the chaos. The seal awakens. The path of the serpent begins. A circle of light formed beneath Lyra and Rael's feet. Symbols spiraled outward, glowing in gold and silver. Rael reached for her hand. Whatever happens, don't let go. I won't, she whispered. The light consumed them. When the brilliance faded, the temple was silent. The Wraithborn were gone, scattered like dust. The codex lay open on the altar, its pages blank. Rael and Lyra stood at the center of the scorched floor, their hands still joined. The mark on her wrist had spread, forming a mirrored pattern on his skin. He looked down at it, breathless. "It's in me now." Lyra nodded slowly. "We're connected, fully." Lysara's fading voice echoed through the hall. "Then the final trial awaits. The Wraithborn citadel beneath the hollow city. There, the serpent will either rise, or break forever." Her image vanished. Rael and Lyra stood in silence for a long time, the wind howling through the broken temple. Finally Lyra said, "Then it's time we end this." Rael met her gaze, his eyes glowing faint silver. Together, they walked out into the storm side by side, two hearts bound by light and shadow, carrying the last hope of two dying worlds. The storm rolled over the empire like a living beast. Lightning clawed at the sky, and thunder growled through the mountains as the vampire capital burned. From the northern hills, Lyra and Rael watched the smoke rise, black and heavy, swallowing the stars. "It's begun," Rael said quietly. "The Wraithborn are making their final move." Lyra's hand clenched around her cloak. "They've taken the capital already." He nodded grimly. "Every loyalist stronghold. They'll purge what's left by dawn." "We have to go back," she said. Rael turned to her, rain sliding down his face. "And do what?" "Die with them. They're your people." He looked away. "They were my father's, not mine." The wind carried the faint sound of screams from the valley below. Lyra stepped closer, her eyes fierce. "You said you wanted to lead differently. If you leave them, you're no better than the monsters who started this." Rael's jaw tightened. He stared at the flames for a long time, then finally said, "You're right." He drew his sword, its edge catching the lightning. "Then we save whoever we can." They reached the city by nightfall. The once golden towers were now blackened husks. Fires burned in every street, and creatures of shadow stalked the ruins. Lyra and Rael moved through the chaos like ghosts, cutting through patrols of corrupted soldiers. The deeper they went, the worse the carnage became. Bodies of vampires and humans piled together, their faces twisted in the same agony. "They're feeding on both sides," Lyra whispered. Rael's voice was flat. "They don't see race. Only hunger." They turned down a narrow alley and stopped. Ahead, a group of Wraithborn soldiers had cornered a cluster of survivors. Human servants and vampire children huddled together. One of the soldiers raised his blade. Rael moved before Lyra could think. His sword flashed, cleaving through the attacker. The rest turned, hissing like beasts. Lyra raised her hand. The serpent mark blazed, unleashing a wave of silver light that sent the shadows scattering. The survivors stared in stunned silence. A small boy, pale, fanged, no older than 10, stepped forward. "You're the prince," he whispered. Rael sheathed his sword. "Not anymore." The boy shook his head. "You came back. My mother said you would." Rael froze, then knelt so he was eye level with the child. "Where is your mother?" The boy pointed toward the palace. "They took her, the ones with white eyes." Lyra's stomach turned cold. "The Wraithborn generals." Rael stood, his expression unreadable. "Then we end this tonight." The palace was worse than the streets. The grand halls were slick with blood. The marble floors reflected firelight like liquid gold. They moved through the corridors in silence until they reached the throne hall, the same place where Rael had slain his father. It was unrecognizable. The banners of the vampire court had been torn down, replaced by massive black sigils painted in blood. At the center of the room stood a figure draped in white robes, tall, slender, and wrong. Skin shimmered like smoke. "So the fallen prince returns," it said, voice echoing as if spoken by 1,000 mouths. Rael stepped forward. "You wear my father's crown." The creature tilted its head. "He offered it freely when he called for power. We merely answered." Lyra drew her dagger. "You're the Wraithborn leader." "Leader?" it said, amused. "We have no leaders, only hunger. But yes, you may call me what your kind once did, the Pale Serpent." Rael's eyes narrowed. You started this war. The creature's smile widened, showing teeth sharp as glass. No. We simply reminded you that peace is unnatural. Balance is a lie. Life thrives on blood. Lyra raised her wrist. Then you'll drown in it. The mark flared, and light poured from her hand. The pale serpent lifted one arm, deflecting the energy as if it were nothing. The blast hit the wall, shattering stone. You have strength, it said. But you still think like prey. Rael lunged, his sword wreathed in silver flame. He slashed at the creature's chest, but it dissolved into smoke, reforming behind him. A shadow blade appeared in its hand, plunging through Rael's side. Rael! Lyra screamed. He staggered, blood spilling from the wound. The creature leaned close to his ear. You cannot kill what was never alive. Lyra charged, fury igniting her mark. The light exploded again, brighter, hotter. It struck the pale serpent full in the chest, tearing away its illusion. Beneath the white robes was a body made of writhing shadows and human faces, hundreds of them, screaming silently. The creature hissed, retreating into the smoke. Rael collapsed to his knees. Lyra caught him, pressing her hand to the wound. Stay with me. He gritted his teeth. It's nothing. It's everything, she said fiercely. You can't die now. I won't, he said weakly. Not until this ends. They escaped the palace through the underground tunnels. Behind them, the crimson throne burned until nothing remained. When they reached the city's edge, Lyra looked back one last time. The night sky glowed red. Rael leaned heavily on her shoulder, pale but alive. The empire has fallen, he said quietly. Then we build another, she answered. He gave a faint smile. You talk like a queen. Maybe I'm learning from a king, she said. They moved into the darkness, carrying with them the survivors. Humans, vampires, children, soldiers, all united by loss. For the first time in history, both races fled together. And as they disappeared into the night, Lyra felt the serpent mark pulse, not with pain but with purpose. The refugees settled in the ruins of an ancient fortress far to the south, deep within a forest untouched by war. The humans called it Haven. The vampires named it the Hollow Keep. It was here that the first whispers of alliance began. The first weeks were chaos. Hunger, fear, mistrust. Humans built fires that vampires avoided. Vampires guarded the perimeter while humans tended to the wounded. But slowly something changed. Children played together. Soldiers shared food. Enemies became neighbors. And at the center of it all were Rael and Lyra. She spent her days among the humans, teaching them what she had learned of the mark's power. He trained the vampire survivors, teaching them to fight the shadows that still haunted the forest. At night they planned together. We can't stay hidden forever, Lyra said one evening, sitting beside the fire. The pale serpent is still out there. It will come for us. Rael nodded. Then we strike first. She looked up sharply. Strike? With what army? He smiled faintly. With one forged from both sides. She frowned. You really think they'll fight together after everything that's happened? Rael's gaze was steady. They already are. They just don't realize it yet. He rose, calling to the gathering crowd of humans and vampires who watched from the shadows. Listen to me, he said, his voice carrying over the crackling fire. You've all lost homes, families, hope. Have to. But the Wraithborn feed on division. They want us to see only difference. Tonight that ends. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Rael drew his dagger and cut his palm. Blood, dark and thick, dripped onto the ground. Then he looked to Lyra. Will you join me? She hesitated only a moment before slicing her own hand and letting her blood mix with his. The two streams, red and silver, swirled together, glowing faintly where they met. This is the blood accord, Rael said. Vampire and human bound by oath. We fight as one or we die alone. For a moment no one moved. Then the small vampire boy from the city stepped forward and pressed his cut hand to theirs. A human soldier followed. Then another. Soon the entire courtyard glowed with mingled blood. The mark on Lyra's wrist flared bright, casting a silver light over the crowd. The people gasped as they felt it. The warmth, the unity, the spark of something greater than fear. Rael looked at her and smiled. "You've done it." She shook her head. "We did it." Days turned into weeks. Under their leadership, Haven became more than a refuge. It became an army. Humans forged weapons blessed by the serpent's light. Vampires taught combat and night strategy. Together, they hunted the remaining Wraithborn scouts that prowled the woods. Yet even in unity, shadows lingered. One night, as Lyra walked through the forest perimeter, she heard voices, low, conspiratorial. She hid behind a tree and listened. "He's growing too powerful," a vampire said. "The mark corrupts him. We should strike before he turns." Her heart stopped. Rael stepped into the clearing, his expression hard. "You think I don't hear you?" The traitors froze. He looked at them, not angry but weary. "If I fall to the mark, then you have my permission to end me. Until then, fight the real enemy." He turned and walked away, his cloak whipping behind him. Lyra stepped out of hiding. "You heard them. Every word. And you're still calm." He gave a small smile. "Fear makes people foolish. I can't punish them for being afraid." She studied him. "You've changed." Rael met her gaze. "So have you." For a long moment neither spoke. Then he said, "Tomorrow we march. The Pale Serpent's army gathers near the Hollow City. This ends there." Lyra nodded, the mark on her wrist pulsing softly, as if in agreement. "Then tomorrow," she said, "we take back the dawn." The next morning, the army of Haven assembled beneath the rising sun. Vampires stood shoulder to shoulder with humans, banners bearing both emblems fluttering together, the serpent and the flame. Rael mounted his horse, black as midnight. Lyra rode beside him, her cloak lined in silver. He looked at her. "Ready." She smiled faintly. "As I'll ever be." Rael raised his sword. "Then ride." And as the army surged forward, thunder rolled through the valley, the sound of history turning. Behind them, the fires of unity burned. Ahead, the shadows of the Hollow City waited. And for the first time in centuries, light and darkness marched side by side. The march to the Hollow City took 7 days. 7 days of blood-colored sunsets and nights full of whispers. The deeper they went into the southern wastes, the darker the sky became. Even the moon hid behind black clouds as though afraid to look down. Lyra rode beside Rael at the front of the army. Below them stretched the valley, a wasteland of broken stone and twisted ruins, once a thriving trade city before the Wraithborn turned it into a graveyard. At the valley's center rose the hollow citadel, its spires bent like claws grasping at the heavens. Shadow crawled across its walls like living smoke. Rael stared at it, jaw clenched. "That's where they're nesting. Where the pale serpent waits." Lyra nodded grimly. "Then that's where we end this." Rael raised his voice so all could hear. "Tonight we camp on the ridge. Tomorrow we strike at dawn." The soldiers cheered, though their voices trembled with fear. Lyra could see it in their eyes, the quiet dread that comes before the final storm. That night the campfires burned low. Lyra sat apart, studying the serpent mark glowing faintly on her wrist. It no longer burned as before. Now it pulsed with calm, steady light, almost like it breathed with her. Rael approached, silent as the wind. "Can't sleep. Not with that thing staring at us." She nodded toward the black silhouette of the citadel. Rael sat beside her. "When this is over, maybe we'll see sunlight again." "You think it's that simple?" "No," he admitted. "But I like pretending." They shared a small, tired laugh, the kind of laughter born from exhaustion rather than joy. Lyra's eyes drifted to the horizon. "You never told me how your mother died." Rael looked down at the fire. She tried to stop the first purge. When the council decided to erase the human cities, she stood against them. They called her a traitor. He paused, his voice rough. They made me watch. Lyra reached for his hand. You've carried that guilt a long time. He met her gaze. We both have our ghosts. The silence stretched, heavy but not cold. Then Lyra whispered, if we don't survive tomorrow, we will. But if we don't. Rael leaned closer, pressing his forehead against hers. Then whatever waits beyond life will find us together. She closed her eyes, feeling his breath against her skin. Steady, real, alive. Just before dawn, the scouts returned with grim news. The Wraithborn have gathered at the gates, one said breathlessly. Thousands of them. They're waiting. Rael stood and drew his sword. Then we won't keep them waiting. The army formed ranks along the ridge, a river of steel and determination. The humans carried silver-forged weapons, blessed by the mark's light. The vampires wore dark armor inscribed with runes that shimmered faintly under the gray sky. Lyra stepped forward, raising her hand. The serpent mark glowed bright, sending streaks of silver light through the clouds. Today, she shouted, her voice echoing across the valley, we fight not for blood, not for revenge, but for a world that's ours together. The soldiers roared in response, the sound shaking the stones. Rael raised his sword. Charge! The army surged forward. The battle began in chaos. Wraithborn poured from the citadel gates, faceless forms wrapped in smoke, wielding blades that shimmered with stolen light. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Lyra fought near the front lines, her dagger flashing silver arcs. Every strike of her mark sent ripples of light through the battlefield, pushing back the shadows. Rael fought beside her, a whirlwind of steel and fire, his eyes glowing faintly with the serpent's power. Together they moved as one, human and vampire, light and shadow in perfect balance. But the Wraithborn were endless. For every one that fell, two more emerged. We can't hold this line, a soldier shouted. Rael shouted back. Then we push forward. They drove deeper into the enemy ranks, cutting a path toward the citadel gates. The ground was slick with ash and blood. As they reached the entrance, a blinding flash erupted above, and from it descended a figure cloaked in black and silver. Lord Marius, Rael whispered, disbelief twisting his face. It can't be. Lyra froze. She recognized the name, Rael's closest friend, his second in command. Marius landed lightly, his eyes glowing the same pale silver as the Wraithborn. You always were slow to see the truth, Rael. Rael stepped forward, voice shaking with anger. You betrayed us. I served the true order, Marius said calmly. The Wraithborn don't destroy. They purify. They'll make this world eternal. Rael's grip tightened on his sword. By killing everything that breathes. Marius smiled faintly. By ending the cycle of hate you cling to. He raised his hand, and a wave of shadow exploded outward. Soldiers screamed as they were thrown back. Lyra stumbled but recovered, the serpent mark blazing. He's one of them. Not one of, Marius said, his voice echoing unnaturally. The first of. Rael stared in horror. You let them inside you. I became what this world needed, Marius said. You, of all people, should understand sacrifice. He moved like lightning, his blade striking Rael's chest. Rael blocked, sparks flying. Their swords clashed again and again, each impact ringing like thunder. Marius! Rael shouted between blows. Don't do this. It's already done, Marius hissed, driving Rael backward. You and your human toy can't stop what's coming. Lyra darted forward, slashing at Marius's side. Her blade bit deep, but instead of blood, black smoke poured from the wound. The stench was of rot and cold iron. He turned on her, eyes blazing. You dare touch me. The shadow struck like a whip, sending her crashing into the ground. The mark on her wrist flared, pain ripping through her arm. Rael lunged, driving his sword through Marius's chest. For my father, he said quietly. Marius smiled even as the light left his eyes. "For the serpent," he whispered, and then he dissolved into ash. Rael stood trembling, his blade still glowing faintly red. Lyra rose slowly, blood on her lip. "Rael!" He turned to her, and she saw it. The same silver veins that had marked the Wraithborn were now creeping up his arm from where Marius's blade had struck him. "No," she whispered. "Not you." Rael's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed fear. "It's inside me now. We can stop it. The mark can." He shook his head. "Not yet. Not here. We finish the battle first." Then he turned toward the citadel gates, forcing them open with a surge of power that cracked the stone. The army followed him into the heart of the hollow city. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and whispers. The walls pulsed like veins, and at the center of the great hall stood a massive obsidian altar, the core of the Wraithborn's power. As Rael approached, the silver veins in his skin pulsed in rhythm with the altar's light. "They're calling to you," Lyra said urgently. "You have to fight it." He smiled faintly. "I'm trying." The pale serpent's voice echoed through the hall, ancient and cruel. "You bring your doom into my heart, little prince." How poetic. Rael lifted his sword. "Then let's see if doom can bleed." And with that, the final battle began. The war that followed would later be called the Night Without Stars. No moon shone, no wind stirred. Only the clash of steel and shadow, the scream of dying light. The pale serpent descended in a storm of black fire, its true form no longer human. Its body was a swirling mass of faces, its wings formed from smoke and ash. Rael charged, the serpent mark on his chest blazing through his armor. Lyra followed, the mark on her wrist pulsing in perfect harmony with his. Every strike of their blades sent ripples of light through the darkness, tearing holes in the creature's body. But each time they struck, the wounds closed again. "You can't kill what feeds on death," the pale serpent hissed. Lyra's voice rang clear. "Then we'll starve you." She pressed her hand to the floor, channeling the mark's light through the stone. Silver cracks spread across the hall, cutting off the shadow's advance. The pale serpent screamed, its voice shaking the world. "You are nothing. A fragment of a broken promise." Rael leapt, driving his sword into its chest. "Then here's a new one." The explosion threw them both backward. The ceiling cracked, fire raining down. Rael landed hard, coughing blood. The silver veins on his arm had spread across his neck now. Lyra crawled to him, grabbing his face. "Stay with me." He gave a weak smile. Still pretending. Tears streaked down her face. "You don't get to die pretending." He reached up, brushing her cheek. "If I fall, the mark will pass to you. Use it to seal the vault. End this." "I can't," she whispered. "You can. You must." Before she could answer, the pale serpent's shadow loomed over them again, its laughter echoing like thunder. Lyra stood, fury burning away her fear. "You took everything from us," she shouted. "But you forgot one thing. Light always finds a way." She pressed her glowing wrist to the serpent's chest. The mark flared brighter than ever, silver fire consuming both of them. The pale serpent screamed, a sound that shook mountains. Its form shattered into dust, torn apart by the light. When the light finally faded, silence fell. Rael lay on the ground, barely breathing. Lyra knelt beside him. The mark on her wrist was gone. Now it blazed across both their chests, intertwined in gold and silver. He smiled faintly. "You did it." "We did it," she said, her voice breaking. Outside, the first dawn in centuries broke across the horizon. Rael's eyes softened as he looked toward the light. "It's beautiful." "Stay," she whispered. "Stay and see it." "I will," he murmured. "Always." His hand slipped from hers. Lyra pressed her forehead to his, sobbing as the morning sun filled the hall. Around her, the shadows melted away. The army outside raised their swords, cheering through tears as the light touched their faces for the first time. Rael's body shimmered with faint silver light, and then dissolved, merging into the dawn. By sunset, the hollow city stood silent. The Wraithborn were gone. The air was still. Lyra climbed the citadel's highest tower, the wind tugging at her cloak. On her wrist, where the mark once burned, now rested a small golden serpent coiled in peace. She looked out over the world, alive again, free at last. Below, humans and vampires stood side by side, rebuilding. And though her heart ached, she smiled. "We kept your promise," she whispered to the wind. The dawn returned. As the sun dipped below the mountains, a faint warmth brushed her cheek. Soft, familiar. For a moment, she swore she heard Rael's voice, carried on the wind. Always. The world was quiet after the storm. The hollow city stood in ruins, its black towers now gray in the morning light. The battle had ended, but the air still hummed with leftover magic, the kind that clings to the bones of the earth after gods bleed. Lyra walked through the empty streets, her boots crunching over dust and ash. The serpent mark, now golden, fused into her chest, pulsed gently like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. Every few steps, she thought she heard echoes of Rael's voice in the wind. But when she turned, there was only silence. She found herself in the great hall where he had fallen. Sunlight streamed through the shattered ceiling, falling over the spot where his body had vanished. She knelt there, pressing her palm to the cold stone. "We did it," she whispered. "You kept your promise. You gave me dawn." The mark flared softly in response, a slow, sorrowful pulse that spread warmth through her veins. She closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. When she opened them again, she was no longer alone. Rael stood before her, or something like him. His body shimmered like glass, translucent, his eyes brighter than the sun. "Rael!" She reached out, her hand trembling. He smiled faintly. "You shouldn't be able to see me." "Then maybe I shouldn't be alive," she said. He stepped closer, though his form flickered at the edges. "You are. Because the serpent chose you." Her voice broke. "It was supposed to be you. It was both of us," he said gently. "The serpent's power doesn't belong to one life. It's a balance. Death feeding life, shadow giving light." She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. "That's not balance. That's loss." Rael smiled sadly. "Sometimes they're the same thing." The hall shimmered, colors bleeding like water. The air grew heavy, and suddenly they were no longer in the ruins. They stood in a vast, endless field, grass swaying under a golden sky. Lyra looked around in awe. "Where are we?" Rael looked upward. "Between worlds. The serpent's realm." A low hum filled the air. The ground beneath their feet pulsed with light. From the horizon rose a colossal figure, half light, half shadow, the embodiment of the serpent itself. Its eyes were suns. Its body stretched beyond sight. Its voice spoke directly into their minds, deep and ancient. Two halves made one. Balance restored. But choice remains. Lyra flinched. "Choice?" The serpent's eyes turned toward her. "The bond is incomplete. The seal broken by death may be mended, if one life joins the other fully. Choose. Preserve your world's peace, or return what you have lost." Rael turned to her slowly. "It's offering you a choice." Lyra's throat tightened. "If I bring you back, the balance breaks," he said quietly. "The Wraithborn will return. The world will fall again. But if I let you go," he smiled softly, "the dawn remains." Tears spilled down her face. "You're asking me to let you die for peace that might not even last." He stepped closer, brushing his hand along her cheek, and for the first time she could feel him. Warm. Real. "You already gave everything. Don't take it back. I can't lose you again." "You won't," he whispered. "Not truly. The mark binds us beyond life. Wherever you walk, I'll be there." The serpent's voice rolled like thunder. "Choose." Lyra's breath hitched. She looked into Rael's eyes, the eyes that had terrified her once, the eyes that now felt like home. Then she pressed her hand against his chest, where the golden light burned. "I choose life," she whispered. "For all of them. And for you, wherever you are." Rail smiled. "Then you've chosen right." The serpent's massive form began to dissolve into light, its voice fading like a distant song. "So the world endures. So the coil continues." Rail's form grew fainter. Lyra's fingers slipped through his as he whispered, "You'll lead them better than I ever could." "I love you," she said, her voice breaking. "And I you," he murmured. "Always." Then he was gone. When Lyra opened her eyes, she was back in the ruined hall. The mark on her chest glowed softly, and for the first time it didn't hurt. She looked up at the sunlight spilling through the cracks, and the air seemed lighter, freer. Outside she heard voices, hundreds of them. Survivors gathering. Humans and vampires alike. She stood slowly, brushing dust from her cloak, and walked to the balcony. Below, the armies of Haven waited, faces upturned, hope shining in eyes that had forgotten what it looked like. Lyra lifted her hand. The mark shimmered gold, casting light across the crowd. "It's over," she said, her voice carrying through the ruins. "The shadows are gone. The serpent sleeps, and with it, the hatred that once fed our war." A murmur spread through the crowd. Some wept. Some simply fell to their knees, as if the weight of centuries had finally lifted. A human soldier stepped forward. "What happens now?" Lyra looked at him, then at all of them. "Now we build a world where no child has to bleed to prove they belong." She placed her palm over her heart, feeling the warmth of the serpent's light. Rail gave his life for that dream. Don't let it fade. The crowd bowed their heads. And in that silence, Lyra felt him. A whisper in the wind, a warmth in her blood, a presence just beyond reach. Always. Years passed, and the story of the serpent became legend. Where once the hollow city stood, now rose the citadel of dawn, a sanctuary built of pale stone and living light. Humans and vampires worked side by side to raise it from the ashes. Lyra ruled not as a queen, but as a guide. They called her the Marked One, the woman who ended the endless night. Each dawn, she stood on the citadel's balcony, watching the sun rise over a world reborn. Children of both bloodlines played in the streets below, their laughter echoing where once only screams had lived. And though peace was fragile, it endured. Still at night when the wind whispered through the halls, she sometimes turned, expecting to see Rail in the doorway, half-smile on his lips. But only moonlight greeted her. One evening, as she reviewed the scrolls of rebuilding, a young scribe entered. "My lady," he said, bowing deeply. "A new report from the southern provinces. Another settlement joins the accord." She smiled. "Good. Every union strengthens us." He hesitated. They name their town Rail's Rest." Lyra's heart clenched. She nodded. "Let them. It's fitting." When he left, she walked alone through the silent halls until she reached the chamber where the serpent's mural had been carved. Two figures intertwined, human and vampire, forming a single golden coil. She reached out and traced the lines with her fingertips. "You'd laugh if you saw all this," she murmured. "Me sitting on councils giving orders. You'd say I finally learned to stop running." The mark on her chest pulsed gently, answering her with warmth. She closed her eyes and let the memory of his voice fill her mind. Later that night, a storm rolled across the horizon, not of shadow but of rain. The first in years. Lyra stood outside as it fell, letting the water wash over her face. The scent of earth filled the air. She looked toward the dark line of the mountains where the final battle had once raged. For the first time, the peaks glowed gold under lightning. Behind her, footsteps approached. It was the young scribe again, drenched from the storm. "My lady, there's something you should see." He handed her a folded piece of parchment, an ancient letter, discovered buried beneath the foundation of the old hollow city. The handwriting was unmistakably Rail's. Lyra's hands trembled as she unfolded it. "If you are reading this, then the serpent's promise has been kept. I always believed peace was a dream, but you made it real. Remember, The serpent's light is not meant to rule, but to remind. When fear returns, look to the dawn. It will carry my voice. She pressed the letter to her heart, tears mixing with the rain. Rail, she whispered. You're still teaching me. She turned toward the east. The storm was breaking, sunlight piercing through in long golden rays. The mark on her chest shimmered, faint, almost imperceptible but alive. The years turned into decades. The citadel grew into a vast city, not divided by blood, but united by memory. The festivals of dawn became a yearly ritual, where humans and vampires gathered together to light candles for those lost. And every year Lyra lit one more. Her hair turned silver. Her face bore the lines of time, but her eyes still carried the same fire. Children who had never seen war listened to her stories of Rael, of the serpent, of the world before light. When they asked if she missed him, she always smiled. He's not gone, she would say. He's part of the dawn. On the 50th year after the fall of the Hollow City, Lyra walked alone to the edge of the mountains. The wind was warm, the sky endless blue. She carried no guards, no crown, only the serpent's mark and the memory of a man who'd changed everything. At the summit, she found the place where Rael had fallen. The stone still shimmered faintly with golden light. She knelt, resting her hand upon it. I kept your promise, she whispered. The world is still turning. They live together now. Not perfectly, but enough. The wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of blood and rain. And then softly she heard it, a voice in the breeze as familiar as her own heartbeat. You did well, Lyra. She smiled through her tears. Took me long enough. Always stubborn. Always yours. The mark on her chest began to glow, golden and bright. The wind swirled around her, lifting her hair. Lyra closed her eyes, letting the warmth consume her. Her last breath was a whisper. I'm coming home. When the people of the citadel found her, she was lying peacefully among the wildflowers, sunlight spilling over her face. There was no pain, no fear, only peace. Above her, the clouds parted, revealing a double sunrise. Two suns rising together for the first time in recorded history. The priests called it the serpent's blessing. From that day on, dawn never fully faded again. The light lingered, eternal and soft, a world reborn in balance. And in that light, if one listened closely, they could sometimes hear two voices whispering together in the wind. A promise kept forever. Always. And so, the serpent sleeps, but its light lives on. If this story pulled you into its world, don't let it end here. Subscribe to join me for the next tale where love defies fate, darkness meets dawn, and the impossible becomes legend. Drop your thoughts below. What was your favorite moment? Would you have made Lyra's choice? Hit that bell because the next story rises soon. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.